Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we'll be taking a look at the biggest changes coming to next patch 8.17. And this is going to be the patch where the Nunu rework is finally released and a bunch of awesome skins. Now as per usual, this video is going to be made in collaboration with Pro Guides. Their website aims to improve your overall League of Legends gameplay knowledge and all that good stuff. They also have a cool feature where you can actually message high-low players of a specific role and ask them questions to help you improve. On top of this, they have also given me a $25 RP card to give away for this video. All you have to do is leave a comment down below and subscribe to their YouTube channel with the link down below. With all that being said and done, let's get right into the video. So the first change and probably the biggest change of this patch is of course going to be the rework of Nunu. It is finally coming out in just a couple of days, and I'll give you guys a quick TLDR of what the champion actually does and my overall thoughts. Nunu's current passive is essentially the old Blood Boil, just again thrown into the passive. His Q ability is still pretty much the same, being Consume, except now you can actually use it on enemy champions, which gives it a lot more versatility, and you can even make a lane Nunu a bit more effective and make the ganks also a little bit more effective. Following that, we have Nunu's new bread and butter, probably the best ability within the whole kit, which is of course making the large snowball. Think of Sion's ultimate instead just turned into a basic ability, and that's exactly what this ability is. It gives Nunu a little bit extra movement speed, is very hard to stop, and of course ganking with this, especially ganking through the lane, is not only very hard to actually be ready for and ward against, but it is also extremely effective. So I personally believe that the early ganks that Nunu can pull off are going to be one of the best in the jungle at the very moment, just because of this W. Following that, the E ability is just throwing a bunch of snowballs at someone within a small AoE around you. You can hit up to 3 targets with it, and at the end of the duration of the E ability, if the people that you hit snowballs with are still within the circle, they'll actually get CC'd, which is very powerful when combining that with your ultimate. But speaking of his ultimate, I mean, it's essentially the same thing. There really isn't a whole lot of differences. So all in all, I actually think Nunu will come out and not be that weak. I don't think it'll be completely overpowered, but I feel like people will understand that, you know what, this W is actually really damn strong. The fact that you can consume champions now is also quite nice, and I believe Nunu will come out with about a 45% or so win rate, which really isn't that bad for new champions. Again, the biggest thing to watch out for without question, whether you're playing Nunu or versing a Nunu, is the W gank through lane. But next, let's talk about the buffs and nerfs coming over to the champions. We'll be starting off by talking about a quick change coming to Annie, but it's also a pretty big change at the same time. The attack range on Annie is being increased by 50. Now this is a little bit of a questionable change because Annie's current auto attack range, even though it's only 575, I mean, it is deceptively long because Annie's wind up time is very long. So it always seems like she's hitting you from a lot farther than she should be. Well, this is going to be even farther now just because of this buff. Now I'm not entirely sure what the goal is for Riot and why they even wanted to make this buff and increase their auto attack range. I'm not sure if they're trying to make support Annie better or what the reason behind this overall is, but I mean, the change is coming. It's kind of questionable, and we'll see what happens. The next thing we'll talk about quickly is going to be a buff coming towards a Bart, more specifically towards his ultimate, Tempered Fate. The cooldown on this ability is being lowered by 20 seconds at rank 1, 15 at rank 2, and 10 seconds at rank 3. Bart has always been one of those kind of questionable supports where either you have a Bart that is just utterly just useless, or you have a Bart that actually pops off and can honestly win the game for you. So this buff isn't obviously going to be just insanely massive for a Bart, but a buff is still a buff, and I think Bart mains will regardless be quite happy about this. Next up, we have a buff coming over to Fiora, more specifically towards her E ability Blade Work, where the second basic attack damage has been changed to just essentially give more damage at the earlier ranks, but by rank 5 it's exactly the same, being 200%. So Fiora is definitely a champion where if she's ever even remotely strong in the top lane, she's pretty much pick or ban, because if she's strong, she can outduel almost every single champion. Now even though this buff isn't going to make her completely overpowered, because again, don't forget, the second basic attack of her E ability is a critical strike, and the only parts that are getting buffed are the earlier ranks of the ability, to where the percentage isn't obviously as impactful as it is a lot later into the game. But since Fiora's Q is what people usually want to max first and then max your E ability second, I mean, this is still a pretty decent buff. I mean, 20% is still a decent amount of extra damage that you can dish out whenever you trade in the laning phase. So it still will make her E ability rank 1, which you'll have for the majority of the laning phase, a lot more powerful. Next up, we also have a nerf coming over to Garen of all champions, and I'm not really surprised at all because Garen is honestly probably the king of top lane. Fairly simple champion, but my goodness, is he honestly very powerful. So the nerf to Garen is going to be towards his Q ability Decisive Strike, where the damage on this as you rank it up is being lowered to where by rank 5 it'll just have 20 less base damage. This really isn't that big of a nerf, to be completely honest with you, because Garen's, I mean, I did actually play a bit of Garen, so I looked up into it. You can actually max your Q or E ability first. It's a little bit matchup specific. But even with this, I mean, you can still max your Q first and you really won't lose that much damage. But I mean, worst case scenario, you can put a couple of points into Q and then just start maxing your E ability instead, and you'll probably still find success. This might just nerf maybe Triforce Garen a little bit, since, you know, with Triforce with the Sheen, maxing Q first is a lot more powerful, but at the end of the day, going Black Cleaver with the E max first isn't that bad at all. So in my opinion, a little bit of a slap on the wrist for Garen, considering how honestly powerful this champion really is. Next up, we have a buff coming over to Kassadin once again, and even though I actually believe Kassadin at the very moment is a pretty damn good champion, he is yet getting another buff, and this one's towards his ultimate, where the cooldown on this ability is being lowered at the earlier ranks, a full second at rank 1 and half a second at rank 2, which is a lot more than it sounds. This essentially means that Kassadin next patch is probably going to be a very highly contested mid lane pick. I'd probably have to pick him up myself once again, and I'm not really upset about that because I do think the champion, when he's in the meta, is very powerful, and I do believe this buff is probably going to put him into that state. Following this, we have another buff coming over, this time to Kane, and it's going to be towards his E ability, where the duration on this has just overall been increased, but as you get it to rank 5 it's the same, and the Shadow Assassin bonus movement speed has been increased by 10%. If you don't know, Shadow Assassin refers to his blue form. So it's still an overall buff for Kane in general, despite whichever form you go, but then also a further buff if you decide to go for blue form, which I mean most people don't because it's a little bit riskier, and red form is just overall the better, safer form. Following this, we have a quick buff coming over to Master Yi's W Meditate, where the cooldown on this ability has been decreased by 7 seconds, which is a decent amount, and the damage reduction on this ability has also been increased at the earlier ranks, but also evening out at 70% by rank 5. Master Yi buffs always makes people think this champion is suddenly going to be overpowered, and even though this buff isn't really all that bad, I mean, it's really not anything too crazy either, since it is towards his W. As long as the actual damage numbers haven't been changed, and as long as his W doesn't somehow now give him extra damage or something like that, I think this buff is fine to let through. Following this, we have a buff coming over to Rengar, and it's going to be towards his ultimate, Thrill of the Hunt. The cooldown on this ability has been lowered at rank 1 and rank 2, but then also evening out at 70 seconds at rank 3. I feel like this buff is a little bit more impactful than it may seem, because Rengar's early game can definitely use a little bit of assistance, and this will definitely give him that for sure, because having a 20-second lower cooldown on his ultimate will give him just flat out more pressure at the earlier parts of the game, which is exactly what a champion like Rengar wants. Will this put Rengar over the top? I'm not entirely sure, obviously, but I mean, this will definitely help Rengar with the early game pressure, so better watch out for this champion next patch. And then we have two very quick changes coming over to Varus and Wukong. Starting off with Varus, his HP per level has been increased, but his base HP has been lowered, so a little bit weaker and more vulnerable in the laning phase, but it kind of evens out as the game progresses. And then you have Wukong's attack speed being increased by ever so slightly, probably just to make his auto attack after the E ability or after the Q just a tad quicker. And the next thing I want to talk about is a very interesting change. Essentially, it's like a mini ZOE rework. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is actually even coming out this patch or not. I mean, there were posts about it, but they're not there at the moment, so they may have reverted it or just canceled it altogether, or maybe they're still working on it. I'm not entirely sure, but let's take a look anyways. So starting off with their Q ability, it no longer scales with levels. Now it actually just does 60 to 180 damage rather than 50 to 150. Which can be good or bad depending on how you look at it. Then you also have her W, where the damage is just significantly lower, because not only is the base damage decently lower now, but it's also only 20% AP ratio rather than 40% AP ratio. I mean, these are already pretty damn good news, but her E ability is where the mini rework actually happens. No longer will the E ability, if you miss it, actually create the circle zone on the ground, which if you walk into, you can still be put to sleep. So now apparently if you miss it, it's actually a missed skill shot. But to obviously make up for this, since her E ability is getting such a massive change, the damage is also increased quite heavily, dealing up to 380 base damage and up to 80% AP ratio. And the final thing is going to be towards her ultimate, where when she actually portals on the ground, it lasts a little bit longer, but it no longer gives you vision in the area. So you might have to have a ward ready, or you maybe have to have your team there with vision already. You can't just use it over the dragon pit and see exactly what's happening and make some picks. So it seems like Riot is trying to make ZOE go away from this kind of heavily focused, annoying pick type champion and bursting people from afar to kind of being a little bit more of just a more typical burst mage, where if you have vision, you can probably go in for some big plays, and if you don't, it'll be a lot more difficult. Let me know down in the comments below, guys, what you think about this mini ZOE rework. Again, I'm not sure if it's coming out this patch or not, but I thought I'd bring it up anyways. The second last thing I want to talk about is going to be some changes coming over to two items, Duskblade and Stormrazor. For Duskblade, they're actually increasing the lethality by 3, but they're also decreasing the damage that the passive Night Stalker deals. So essentially, as the game progresses, the damage on Night Stalker is going to be just a tad less every single stage compared to the current live damage. Again, by rank 18, 50 less base damage. But then as you move on to Stormrazor, you can see here the AD is being lowered by 5, but the attack speed is actually being increased by 10%, which I think for AD carries is easily a worthy trade-off, but the Storm Edge's crit has also been just overall lowered. The goal that Riot is trying to nerf here is the fact that if people stack Duskblade and Stormrazor, it won't be just completely overpowered together, and I feel like they're slowly kind of accomplishing that goal. I think these two items will still be relatively strong if you buy them together on maybe an assassin or even an AD carry or something, but it's obviously overall going to be still a weaker, but they did a pretty decent job at it without just completely gutting the items, which I was very worried that they would do. And last but not least, guys, a bunch of sexy skins coming out. We have Divine Sword Irelia, Enduring Sword Talon. I'm going to be getting this one for sure. We have High Noon Thresh, High Noon Urgot, and probably the best skin of this patch, High Noon Lucian. Holy shit, is this skin just insane. But that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to share this with your friends. Let everyone know what the changes are coming. Let everyone get an idea as to what Riot is planning to do with ZOE, because it is pretty interesting. But thank you all so much for watching, guys, and hope to see you for the next video. Peace.